Alright, I'm going to do a quick video here about some of the features that VIM has, which make use of external commands easy, for example. And I've been doing this review of my code base, and in order to do that, I needed to have a list of all of the methods that go into my firmware, so that I can go through every single method and make sure that it belongs in the firmware and that it does what it's supposed to do. But I got a suggestion on my Discord channel from a user called EndOfExclusive, which said that, well, he mentioned the utility called add-to-line, which I thought it kind of makes sense, because add-to-line returns, it takes an address of a variable in the elf file, and a variable or a method, and it returns the location of that variable in the source code based on the debugging information that's included in the executable. And the good thing about this output is that it actually allows me to just go directly to this source code file and the line using the vim command little g and big F, so gf, and then I just directly go to this method, which makes it easy to review the code, because I can just go through every single line in this output and go to the corresponding source file, and then I can just press Ctrl O to go back. But so what I did was I just created a shell file, a shell script that outputs, let's see, update symbols, that first uses the nm utility to get the list of symbols, and then I filter this through a regular expression using grep, which filters out anything that any symbols that don't have actual addresses in the executable, because there are some symbols that don't have any addresses, and they are marked as unused. They basically don't belong. I cannot review them. They're from like GCC stuff that just they just don't make sense to have in the output. So I filter out only the ones that have an address in the executable and have a length, and then I go through every single line, and I grab the address, which is the first field of the output. I could have used cut here, I suppose, but yeah, I use sed. And then I feed that line into add-to-line so that I get the name of the name of the source file and the actual line where this symbol resides in that source file. And then I have two files, which one includes the addresses, and which is the one that I'm going to be using for the review, and the other one that doesn't include the addresses, which I just feed through. I sort it, I feed it through awk, and I just print out fields 2, 3, and 4, and this is the file that goes to Git, so that I can then see, like using git diff, I could then see just what has actually changed in the executable. It's kind of like this. Let's see. Where's my cursor? There. Could do like this. And this shows the symbols that I've changed. Right now it shows a little bit more because I changed the optimization level, and also sometimes some methods change in size because of optimizations. So this is just a hint of what has changed. So let's go back to, I'm going to have this set to the picocom. And let's go back to this file that I use for doing the review. So I'm going to use the, let's see, review. This one. So what we can do here now is we could make this a little bit more pretty by making sure that the file names and the method names are slightly more apart. Also, I want to filter out anything that is not in my source base, in my code base, like in my own code base. For example, qsort is located in the libc, and it doesn't have any source file associated with it because it's just the source file is in libc source. So Outr2Line does not know where to find it. So I can remove all of these methods, but first I'm gonna just pipe this through a shell command called column, and I do this by doing like, so I press colon, and then if I were to just run the shell command, I would just do a exclamation mark and then type the shell command. But in this case, I just do the percentage sign, which means pipe the contents of this text buffer through the shell command and then update the text buffer. And I haven't been using this myself. Like I usually just go to the command line and do this. But this is actually very useful, and I think I'm going to be starting to use this much more in Vim, piping the contents of the text buffer through a shell command and just getting the output, because it's quite practical. So column, and then I do T for tab separation between the fields, and this just easily updates the text here, and it's much easier to read now. Everything is placed into columns. So this is pretty neat. And next, I could just use grep to filter out anything that doesn't have a source file. And I could do this by just looking at for example, any line basically that ends with a question mark, which doesn't have an actual line number. And I guess this is actually in my code base, but for some reason Outr2Line is not able to find the addresses. It could be due to optimizations. Sometimes it actually shows an address that is in a header file for a method that is actually in a C file, and I think that's due to the optimizations that GCC is doing. So there is no way to tell where an actual where the generated code actually is in the source code, because GCC has mangled the layout of the executable to make it better optimized. So I think ideally I should probably be using zero optimizations when doing this, but it's kind of like I get a location that is close enough, so I pretty much know where to find it. Okay, so now I can pipe this through grep, and I'm going to use v, and I'm going to use a regular expression, and anything that ends on a question mark and end of line. I think I could do this like this. No, maybe I should I perhaps be escaping this question mark? No. Let's try this. Oh, should I be writing this? Oh, let's see. Yeah, I forgot the exclamation mark. So I've actually been. Yeah, this didn't make any sense. Let's see. Much better. So, next step is to remove anything that's in libraries that I don't want to review, like, for example, libfdt. So I'm going to filter out anything that has libfdt in it. And I use v to kind of get the opposite. So If I were just typing grep libfdt, I would be getting the lines that contain libfdt. But if I use v flag to grep, it takes the everything else that doesn't match the string that I have to just type. So I can do this, let's see. So if I press big G, I can go back. I can go to the end of the file, and now I have 568 methods. I'm going to be able to remove a lot more because I can remove everything that is in FreeRTOS source code. I don't want to review FreeRTOS, so I will just remove that. Let's see, FreeRTOS kernel, and what else could I remove here? Yeah, obviously everything that goes into the standard peripheral library, I don't want to review that either. So I will just remove everything that is part of std perif. And let's see, libfirmware, libdriver, that's all that is my stuff. Anything else that doesn't belong to my code base. Let's see. Possibly the startup stuff. And definitely all of this assembly stuff that goes into startup. Startup STM32. Let's filter that out as well. .400 lines filtered. Let's see. Yeah, this looks manageable. 331 symbols. This I could review. This is just a few pages. This is very nice. However, I want to also I want to sort this list by the source file, so that I can just go through each source file in order and review all the methods that go in there. So let's sort this. I'm gonna pipe this through the sort command, and I'm gonna use column 4. Let's see, 0, 1. Actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be 5, because columns start from 1 and not 0. Ta-da! So now everything is sorted. So even though Vim is a text editor, together with everything that Linux has to provide, it actually ends up being a pretty decent IDE. So I've been using Vim for many years, and I'm very happy with using it. And I think all of the modern IDEs, they could actually learn something from Vim and implement this kind of interoperability, I guess. Like when the editor should be able to readily use other tools that are available without having to re-implement that functionality, and just seamlessly interact with other tools available on the system. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something about Vim. And by the way, I'm using the new Vim, NeoVim, which allows me to have the consoles in the text windows. So I can have things like this. I can run processes, terminals, anything I want, which is very useful as well. And just having it as part of the layout of the text windows just makes everything very nice. Like gives me a very good overview of everything that I'm doing.